On August 13, 1983, Starkey Swenson left his home on bicycle and set off into the Neenah, Wisconsin night. His planned destination and route are unknown. What is known? He was never heard from again. 10 years later, with no trace of Swenson's body ever found, a man was arrested and charged with Swenson's murder. He maintains his innocence, but halts his 1994 trial by accepting a lesser charge and is sentenced to 2 years in prison. To this day, that man, John C. Andrews, refuses to admit any involvement or guilt in the crime. Starkey Swenson's body has never been found. Dr. Jordan Karsten and his team have been asked by investigators to help find the body, and with it, answers. In this podcast, we will review the case in detail, applying today's knowledge and technology, and chronicle the effort to locate and recover the lost body of Starkey Swenson. This is Cold Case, Frozen Tundra. Episode 1, Swallowed by the Night.
Welcome to the Cold Case Frozen Tundra podcast. I'm Dr. Jordan Karsten. I have a PhD in anthropology, and I'm currently an associate professor at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. My area of expertise is the human skeleton, and that includes excavating human burials, recognizing small human bone fragments, determining age, sex, race, and height from skeletal material, and analyzing evidence of past traumatic injury and disease. In my career, I've used this knowledge on both ancient skeletons from archaeological sites and those that are derived from forensic contexts. It's my academic background in excavating human skeletal remains that got me involved in the Starkey Swenson case.
And I'm your co-host, Matt Hiskis. While in my day-to-day life, I'm a communications and media specialist, writer, graphic designer, and producer, I have always been interested in the field of archaeology and the mystery of uncovering the past. To satisfy this curiosity, I have joined Dr. Karsten on several expeditions to uncover human remains, traveling as far as Eastern Europe in search of ancient artifacts, historical evidence, and valuable skeletal data. I'm excited to once again work together, applying what I've learned in these adventures, as well as my communications expertise, towards this investigation into the 1983 murder of Starkey Swenson.
I'm really excited to begin this process, and especially this investigation into trying to find the lost body of Starkey Swenson. Doing the background research into this case, I realized just how fascinating the story is. I mean, there's a whole cast of characters. Their lives are tangled together through friendship, family relationships, affairs, marriages, and I think it really makes for an interesting investigation.
Yeah, and I think what excites me most about this case is the fact that while we do have an individual who has been charged with the crime and in fact has served time related to it, he has claimed he's innocent over all these years. And really, the community and especially the families involved have never truly found any answers. And I'm very excited that through our investigation and ultimately our search for the missing remains of Starkey Swenson, we may help to provide some of those answers for those most closely related to this case.
Yeah, I'm also excited to document for our audience this podcast how the science of anthropology and the methods of archaeology can be used to help try to recover clandestine burials. And we'll get into the science of it in terms of ground penetrating radar, looking at stratigraphy, our methods of excavation, in order to give everybody at home an idea of how we can actually help law enforcement in this process.
So, Dr. Karsten, we're going to be going through this case in detail over the course of this podcast. But why don't we start by sharing a little about your work with the state of Wisconsin criminal justice system and your involvement in this, the Starkey Swenson case?
All right, so after I earned my PhD, I took a job at UW-Oshkosh in the fall of 2014. Almost immediately, I started receiving calls from various law enforcement agencies asking for help on cases that included skeletal remains. Most of the time, these were just situations where hikers or hunters found bones in the woods, they turned them over to their local police, and didn't really know what they were. However, unless a human skull is found, most folks don't have the anatomical knowledge to be able to tell the difference between a human and the non-human animal. And so the cops send me photos of the bones that they are in possession of, and I look for anatomical traits that allow me to determine if the bones are human or not. I get calls like this once every couple of weeks, and in 99% of the time, the bones are white-tailed deer, dog, bear, coyote, or some butchered bone that's left over from your Sunday pot roast. When human bones are found, I'm typically asked to help figure out the age of the bones, the identity of the individual, and if I can, how they died. In Wisconsin, indigenous human populations have been present for at least the past 14,500 years, and their dead are buried around the state. The physical condition of the bone, in terms of its preservation, can be a really big clue as to how old bone is. And I examine that along with other indicators to try to determine if the bones are prehistoric or modern. If they are modern, I use anatomical features to determine if they're the remains of a male or a female, how old they were at the time of death, if they're from an individual that today we would consider to be white, black, Asian, or Native American, and even how tall they were. That information we can use to narrow down a search of possible matches in a missing persons database. And then we can use some unique anatomical features present in medical records in an attempt to obtain a positive identification. My involvement with the Starkey Swenson case actually is mostly connected to my experience excavating human skeletons from archaeological sites. Most of my research is focused on ancient human skeletons, and I've conducted archaeological excavations for the past 13 years, primarily at the prehistoric site of Verteba Cave in Ukraine. There I've located and excavated thousands of human bones that date to around 3,500 BC. As an archaeologist, we're concerned with finding, documenting, and recovering very small bone fragments that survived the millennia, and we make sure that we leave nothing behind. That exact same approach is really useful in forensic situations. So I'm routinely asked to help locate and excavate burials for law enforcement, and I even offer continuing educational courses at UW-Oshkosh on burial excavation for law enforcement personnel. Just this past summer, I conducted excavations in a burned house for the Wisconsin Department of Justice, helped lead a search for a clandestine burial on a tree farm for the FBI, and led a survey for a buried body in a farm field for the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office. The science of anthropology, and especially archaeology, has a lot to offer when it comes to finding clandestine burials, and that's how I got involved with the Starkey Swenson case.
So we're here in 2021. It's almost 40 years since Starkey Swenson first went missing in 1983. And there's a lot we know about this case, but there's probably even more we don't know. We've got no body, a man who served time in connection with the murder, strongly defending his innocence over all these years, and a case which, really, rests on the testimony of only a few individuals whose lives were all tangled together in this bizarre story. You're tasked with finding the missing body of Starkey Swenson. I'm here to help chronicle the search, and hopefully we will be settling some of the disputed facts along the way. So we need to revisit this entire case, start to finish, to identify the individuals involved, inconsistencies in stories, places each person visited around the time of the disappearance, and ultimately land on our search area for Swenson's body. Now, there is a public record of this case. Not only was it big news at the time of Starkey Swenson's disappearance, garnering local and even national attention, but it's also a case that resulted in an arrest and a trial some years later. In preparation for our investigation, we've pored over every bit of information we can find on this case, and we'll be sharing that story with listeners on this podcast. Along the way, we'll be noting the areas we'd like to pursue further. Then, we're going to take it another step deeper. We're going to interview individuals who may have some additional information for us, dig into advancements in science and technology that can help, as well as speak with experts who are also involved in the search, correct?
Yep, that's right. And so for both us and everybody listening, let's dig into some of the details of this case.